Joined in studio by Douglas Carswell, and you have had a unique experience
It
this
is
weekend.
my first ever July the 4th in America, and what an amazing day it was. I was here with my family. They've just arrived.
Awesome.
I've been here for 6 months, but this is our first ever Independence Day in America, and what a great day it was.
Was there anything different from what you thought it was going to be versus what it was actually like?
I was really pleasantly surprised by the patriotism, I think you call it, with the flags, the sense of Americanness, this unashamed, uncomplicated love of country, and that just shone through. I loved it. What an inspiring, as an outsider, what a wonderful thing it says about the Republic. 245 years ago, you guys broke away from the Brits, and I think it's fair to say it's worked out pretty well.
I think so, yeah. I'm biased, I'll admit, but I think it worked out great.
If only everyone in America understood how well America has worked out. I mean, you guys really are the greatest republic on the planet. You exceed even the achievement of the Roman Republic, and yet there are people in America today who are taught to despise their own country. And it seems bizarre to me, as I was watching the fireworks in Jackson yesterday with my family, the sheer joy we felt to be here, we felt a sense of immense privilege to be here. It's like we were at the greatest party in the greatest country on the planet, in the greatest country in human history. And the look on my daughter's face when she saw those fireworks, it was wonderful as a dad. You guys have got something so special here. Please don't lose it.
You mentioned patriotism. That's out of fashion right now. We have people that are literally screaming that America is evil and it's a problem and we should not be celebrating America. Can a nation survive without patriotism?
No, it can't. Look at some of the European countries. They are in a mess. They don't control their borders. They've surrendered their democracy. Their economies are stagnating. They are basically on the way to becoming 21st century museums, known for their former glories and their castles and their dynastic glory, but their current value, very little. Please don't lose your patriotism. There's nothing wrong with patriotism. Nationalism is a bad thing. That is to despise other countries and to put them down against your own. Nationalism is bad. Patriotism is a love of your own country, a love of your fellow Americans, and a belief that actually you're worth something. And that is a very precious thing in this day and age. I mean, the opposite of belief in national self-determination is, of course, imperialism, something you escaped from 245 years ago. Every time a great power has come along and behaved like an empire, humankind that lives within its domains has always suffered. So you're much better off being a free governing republic. And what strikes me as so odd is how there are some people in America, particularly those who perhaps spend a little bit too long at college and university, who believe it's sophisticated to do down the greatest country, to do down the founding ideals. The reason why America is such an achievement, it's not because of the geography, although you've got a beautiful landscape. It's not because of the water or the air. It's because of what was put into the DNA of the Constitution in that founding document drafted in the old courthouse in Philadelphia in the long hot summer of 1787. That is what makes America so incredible and unbelievable and the greatest country in the world. Don't please lose sight of that. Don't forget those founding principles.
Well, and it's like you and I were talking before we went on the air. As it is with a lot of things right now, we have an extremely shrill vocal minority that is railing against everything, including patriotism. That is, in some people's minds, a dirty word now. And it's the opposite, because that, to me, I'm just going to go way out on a limb here. That's part of being an adult, part of being a human being. You have to have a sense of belonging to something.
Yeah, if you don't believe in something, you'll believe in anything. And that one of the reasons why the United States has been so successful is because every decade, a whole bunch of people have turned up here, like I have this year, and they become American. They feel a sense of belonging. Now, you're not going to get people to believe in your country if you don't believe in your country. So it's really actually critically important for America to nurture this sense of uncomplicated patriotism. And it's not only good for America. I think it's a statement of the blindingly obvious. Which country in the world created the world's first vaccine against COVID? The United States. Which country a few weeks later put a drone on the surface of Mars? The United States. America's not just a material achievement, though. It's a moral achievement. You're the first country in human history that when you were number one, you used your military might to free the world and to save it, rather than demanding the submission of weaker countries. You freed the world twice in the First and Second World War, and you freed humankind when you won the Cold War, defeating Soviet communism. No other country has used its might to improve the lot of humankind the way the United States has.
And I think it goes back to a comparison between our form of government and imperialism. It's a different thrust.
Of course. I mean, judge a country by its worst and its best leaders. I would say your best leader ever is probably, if not George Washington or Abe Lincoln, probably Ronald Reagan. Your worst leader, I would say, is probably LBJ, although that's slightly controversial. Compare that to the worst leader that, say, Russia's produced, Stalin, or France, or let's not talk about Germany's worst leaders. But, the United States has for 240-something years produced really good leadership. And the worst leadership you've ever produced is, by international standards, not actually that bad. I mean, pat yourselves on the back, celebrate Americanness. You have achieved something that very few, in fact, no other country has produced. You've risen from being 13 ramshackle British colonies to being the greatest republic in human history, and you have improved the lot of all of humankind as you've done so. If America was based on hatred and racism, the way these shrill people insist, why is it that people from around the planet, from every creed, culture, continent and country, want to come here to make it their home? They're not queuing up to go to Russia, They're not queuing up to go to France. They're not queuing up to go to China. They want to come to the greatest country on earth.
Well, and it goes back to something I said a second ago. That shrill minority is just that. It's a minority. We've heard that term almost to the point to where it has lost some of its meaning, the vocal minority. In this case, that's what we have, and that's because the mainstream media is complicit with them.
Well, they are a minority, but they have captured the strategic heights of what you might call the intellectual economy. They are in academia, the liberal arts colleges. They are in the mainstream media. They have captured Hollywood. They produce movies and films that produce a narrative that does down America, that does down American values. Now, they may be a minority, but so are the Bolsheviks. You cannot leave it to a tiny minority to define Americanness. And I think one of the great struggles of our time is for middle, decent America to recapture from this shrill, politically correct, woke elite a sense of mission as to what it is to be American. Don't let them do down your country.
Well, and you mentioned the woke elite. Wokeism, to me, is one of the greatest threats that we face right now, I think.
I fear that what's happened is amongst the elite, they've lost a sense of religious conviction. And so they try to work out a moral system by looking at their social media feed, and that just creates a virtue signaling mess. You end up with a bizarre system where the so-called elites in society have lost moral purpose, but they're seeking it. So they jump on these bizarre faddish causes. They end up in a huge moral and intellectual muddle, particularly on things like equity versus equality, opportunity, and I just wonder if it might be easier to replace the elite than to replace the people. I mean, George III would have clearly sided with the woke elite. One of the things you were celebrating on July the 4th was freeing your country from a small, entitled elite. Don't submit as a republic to an American version of George III. That would be a disaster.
And that's the problem that we face, I think. And you bring up a good point, because most people, even if they realize this, they forget it. Man, at his most basic, is a moral creature. I know sometimes we look around and think, oh, morals have gone straight down the tubes. There are exceptions. And it seems to be the more power you get, the more of an exception you become to that sometimes. But men are moral creatures. They're looking for some sort of moral framework, and if they don't have one, like religion or something like that, they make one up.
All of us need a moral framework to operate by, and if we think that we don't, we end up in a mess. Look at the experience of Soviet communism. The communists believed that they could create a new moral system. they ended up murdering millions of their own countrymen in the Gulag. You need a moral system, and I think clearly the moral system that is true and just is the Judeo-Christian moral system. It believes in redemption, it believes in mercy, it believes in giving people a second chance. One of the problems with the new moral preachers of today is they don't